Yeah, hi. Hello, everyone. And we are back. All of us have been through very harrowing time for the past few weeks. It has been not easy for many of us. We've all lost somebody dear and near to us in the last few months. So, God willing, things will improve, though none of us can resume life as it was a few years earlier. So, we have to still be careful about how we travel, how we socialize, how we go out birding. So we thought of bringing back some of the old cheer through our weekend talks. As you have been highly appreciated and supported all our talks in the past, we are back with a series 2. So today we have Tim and Carol Inskipp. They don't need any introduction, as all of you would know Tim and Carol, so I would not go into that. So I will start with them right away. Hi, Carol. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Nick and everyone. Many thanks to you, Nick, for inviting Tim and me to talk to you this evening. Especially, I also want to say, we've been listening and looking online at the news every day from Delhi and India with increasing dismay. But I'm relieved to hear that in Delhi, but not everywhere in India, of course, the situation is a bit easier now. I can't see the slides now.
I'm just putting it on. I'm just putting it on. Give me a second.
Okay, thank you.
We've all forgotten Zoom. It's been 1 year. We've all forgotten how Zoom works.
Well, I did. Thank you very much for your support.
Even I have. I'm trying to get back to it.
Kavi Nanda as well for your patience.
Yeah, they've also changed a lot of rules in the last few months. Hi, Tim. How are you?
All right.
I'm fine, thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we both miss, almost needless to say, we both miss India and our Indian friends very much. And, we're longing to come back. We certainly will when we're allowed to.
Yeah. Kavi?
Yep.
Kavi? This is playing on its own, the slideshow. I can't seem to control it.
Just press escape and to control, just go to the first slide.
Nick has kindly agreed to control the slideshow for me because
we all become rusty. We all don't know what's happening. We all become rusty. It's going on its own.
I couldn't work it out. I couldn't work it out. So in the end. Okay, thanks.
Give me a minute, Carol.
Yeah, so Nick and Kavi tried to help me, Kavi Nanda, and in the end they offered to do it for me. So thanks very much, Nick. Here we are at the beginning. Well, wetlands are the habitats which I found the most impressive for birds in India. I think the high in bird diversity, and they're often teeming with birds. And today we wanted to talk about the wetlands some wetlands we've visited in the last few years. But I also want to take this opportunity, I don't know if he's listening, maybe not, but I want to take this opportunity to thank Bikram Grewal for generously hosting both of us several times, actually, in the 1990s. And I particularly remember him taking us to Okhla every time, or organizing we visit Okhla, and we both enjoyed enormously those visits, which were so productive. Right, so I seem to have lost.
I'm trying to get back. Give me a second again.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll carry on anyway. During a 2015 visit to India, Nick organized a holiday trip for us to Gujarat. Next slide, please, Nick.
1 second, just get this thing on.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, let's see if this works.
That looks good. Okay, thank you.
Hopefully it's working.
Yes, it is. And so during that 2015 trip to Gujarat, Nick took us to Jamnagar, and we met. The main purpose of that actually was to see crab plover on the coast there, because it was a new bird for both of us. Somehow we've managed to miss it. Can you go back, Nick? Just go back if you can.
Kavi, why am I doing this? I can't even get this going. Okay.
Right, no, you're doing great. Thank you.
Okay.
And we met some local birdies there: Yashodan, Bhatia, Chirag Solanki, and a number of others actually. So we saw crab plover really well, thanks to them and thanks to Nick. But we stayed in Jamnagar, and late one afternoon, Nick took us to this lake, Lakota Lake, which I must admit I'd never heard of before, right in the middle of the city, and it was just full of birds. And I especially remember seeing great white pelican there. But of course, seeing lots of birds alongside people is characteristic of birding in India, and that's certainly one of the many reasons that I like it. Next slide, please, Nick. That's it, Knobbill duck. So Nick told me once that almost every village in India has its own wetland. And this, in February 2020, just before this awful pandemic hit us all, that was my last visit to India. And Gunjan Arora kindly took me to look for long-eared owl, which we saw near Digal in Haryana, and Sanjay Sharma from Sultanpur came with us as well. We only had 1 to 2 hours birding in lakes, small and larger lakes around that village, but we saw over 60 wetland birds. There were 12 duck species, including this knob-billed duck. Next slide, Nick, please. There were greater painted snipe, beautiful bird. We also saw, next slide, please, Nick, greater flamingo and other birds exciting for us, including, glossy ibis, many more. So that's a good memory for me. And another one is our visit to Hyderpur. Next slide, please, Nick. Hyderpur wetland, I guess some or perhaps many of you know it, in Uttar Pradesh. I also visited there in February 2020, thanks to Samantha Ghosh, who introduced me to Hyderpur, and also to Kalyan Singh Sajwan, who came with us. And yes, Nick, please, the next slide. Highlight of my visit, we're seeing white crown penduline tit. I didn't see it this well, but it, I think we all, but I was very excited about it. And I think we all enjoy seeing new birds. And when I first came to India, I wanted to see as many different bird species as possible. I still do, actually, but my interest has broadened. So to not only just, watching birds, and I've never been a bird photographer actually, but to bird conservation. And so when I visited Hyderpur, I was interested to find out, or to find out more about it. Why was it such a fantastic place for birds? I was so impressed. Almost as soon as I got there, we saw thousands of birds all around. And this wetland didn't even exist when I first came to India. It developed after 1984, when the Madhya Ganga barrage was constructed, and now I'm told it's one of the largest, it's the largest perhaps wetland in Uttar Pradesh. And it's home to around 300 bird species and over 50,000 birds in the winter. Next slide, please, Nick. Yeah. So one of the main reasons Hyderpur is such a valuable place for birds is because it lies on the Central Asian Flyway. Now, the Central Asian Flyway, it covers a huge area of continental Europe and Asia between the Arctic Ocean and the Indian Ocean. It covers important migration routes for many wetland birds. And Hyderpur is a major stopover for as many as 90 migratory bird species. Many bird species are declining rapidly, as you know. This is because wetlands are highly threatened. They're one of the world's most threatened habitats. Birds face uncontrolled hunting, loss of the wetland itself, or their habitat becomes polluted. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the threats to wetland birds. But this is why protecting sites like Hyderpur is vital to secure the future of these water birds. Yeah, next slide, please, Nick. Yeah, and thanks very much to the photographers here. I said I'm not a photographer, so I've relied on for all my photos for other people, which I'm crediting. I hope they're happy with that. Well, large numbers of bar-headed geese pass through or winter at Hyderpur. Apparently, it's 2.8% of the biogeographic population. Now, this bar-headed goose is an incredible bird because it's adapted to flying higher than any other bird species we know. It's even been seen by climbers on the top of no, not on the top. The climbers near the top of Mount Everest. I've seen bar-headed geese flying over. I mean, so that's where oxygen is 10% of what's found at sea level. Next slide, please. Another bird species that migrates through the Central Asian Flyway is in large numbers. Found at I saw large numbers there. We did together is Peruvian duck, a globally near threatened bird. Next slide, please. Another. This is another species that it has a very large breeding range in Eurasia, and unlike the bar-headed goose that flies over the Himalayas, the greater spotted eagle and several other eagle species avoid the high Himalayas, and what they do, they're found to skirt the Himalayas, and they use an east-west pathway parallel to the Himalayas. This has only been found out relatively recently. But I was delighted to see two of these at Hyderpur. It's a regular winter visitor, and as you can see, it's globally vulnerable. Next slide, please. And we also saw one steppe eagle, another regular winter visitor at Hyderpur. It's been uplisted recently to endangered. Previously, it was globally vulnerable. Next slide, please. Other wintering eagles that regularly occur at Hyderpur are Pallas's fish eagle. This is another species which has been uplisted very recently to globally endangered, as its population is much lower than was originally thought. Next slide, please. During my visit, we saw many river terns. This beautiful bird. You can find it all year round at Hyderpur. It's a globally vulnerable species. And next slide. And Hyderpur holds 3% of the biogeographic population of wintering grey-lag geese. This is a very familiar bird to us in the UK. It's actually fairly common bird here, but Hydaspur is internationally important for it. So I just want to talk a bit about conservation measures that are taking place at Hydaspur. During my visit there, Samantha organized I meet Sanjay Kumar. I was honored to meet him. He was divisional commissioner at Saranpur at that time. He's a keen ornithologist, and he's worked tirelessly for the conservation of Hydaspur, and also the proposal for this wetland being designated a Ramsar site. I'm grateful to the range officer at that time, perhaps he still is, who's at Hydaspur, who came with us. That's Manoj Kumar Balodi. 3 bird festivals have taken place at Hydaspur in 2019, 20, and this year, and they were organized by the UP Forest Department and also WWF. I haven't been, unfortunately, but I heard they're successful, and their main purpose is to raise awareness about conservation, importance of conservation of Hydaspur. But as I'm sure you know, while conservation awareness is so important, we need to do more than that if we're going to successfully conserve wetlands. And one of the main things we need to do is to get local people, local communities on side. That is critically important. And there've been a number of training programs for the local communities. For instance, the Wildlife Institute of India at Dehradun, they've organized 2 training communities, passing on skills to local people to learn livelihoods by making handicrafts. The idea is to lessen their dependence on the wetlands. And another person I was delighted to meet at Hydaspur is Ashish Lawyer, who some of you probably know. He's a bird watcher who lives locally, and he's done an enormous amount actually working with local communities. And he, as part of that, he's tried something entirely new, certainly new to me. He's been using spirituality to bring awareness about conservation. So he first conducted art of living yoga and meditation classes for local youth and children from the surrounding villages. And during those sessions, he imparted the importance of biodiversity and the environment. And recently told me that he conducted a 7-day training program for the local boatmen. I've not heard of that before, but the idea was to train them in basic birding, so that when they take out tourists, they're able to point out birds to the tourists. And some of them have told him that their income has increased since they've been doing this, because they're able to point out to visitors who take their boat rides different birds. So I think that's great. Next slide, please. This is my last one, and then I'm handing over to Tim. I can't finish Hydaspur without saying it's not just important, for birds and a source of livelihood for local communities. It's got a big swamp deer population. I believe that's the national mammal of UP. You can see one couple here in the picture, and otters and other mammals and fish as well. It's very important for those. I want to hand over to Tim now, and I'll talk to you again later. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, Tim.
I'm going to talk about a visit to Pong Wetland in Himachal Pradesh that I went to last year. You probably know about this wetland, many of you. It's a massive reservoir which was created in 1975 and occupies an area of 240 square kilometers, but that increases up to 450 square kilometers when the area is flooded after the monsoon. And it has a maximum depth of nearly 100 meters. It is a wildlife sanctuary and one of the most important sites in India for wetland birds, with an estimate of 115,000 migratory birds counted in 2019. At least 350 species of birds have been recorded in the sanctuary, and new ones are added every year. I'm going to talk about a visit I made to the area for 4 days in February last year with Mike Prince, that many of you will know, and Pooja Sharma, and mention some of the special birds we saw there, illustrated by photos just taken by the three of us. The photos in general are not frame-filling shots of the birds, but give some idea of the habitats in which we saw them. I apologize to participants who are accessing this on their phones because if the images are not clear enough. We visited several areas in the western part of the reservoir, from Nagrota Suryan in the north. You can see on the slide, just in the center of the north, and down to Sansapur Terrace in the south, just east of the Pong Dam area. Next slide, please. With such a large area, it is difficult to get photos showing the size of it. So this is just a view of one very small part of it. Next slide, please. And another view from the west side of the reservoir at Myra Pali, showing the three of us relaxing and watching some interesting birds below, including a flock of 24 common shelduck. Next slide, please. We were lucky to be invited on a boat trip with Devinder Singh Dudwal, the Assistant Conservator of Forest for the area, which took us to an inlet at Bihar in the north, an area difficult to reach except by boat, and one that has turned up some of the most interesting species for the site. Next slide, please. We recorded 181 species of birds in the 4 days we were there. And I would just mention some of the more interesting groups of birds. For instance, we saw 16 species of ducks and geese, of which the bar-headed goose were by far the most abundant, with official estimates of up to 25,000 in some winters, making it the most important site in India for the species. We estimated a maximum of 5,000 on the first day we were there, but this was more of an educated guess than an actual count. The birds are spread over a huge area in big and small flocks, so it's very difficult to count. The next slide, please. Ruddy shelduck was another common species we saw, but much smaller numbers, a maximum of 210 on one day. And there were large numbers of diving ducks, mainly common pochard and tufted ducks, but many of these were too far from the shore to count. Next slide, please. The next group of birds mentioned, which were present in impressive numbers, were the waders or shorebirds, of which we saw 22 species, including this rather atypical species, the great thickney, which doesn't do much wading normally on dry land like this. Next slide, please. This is a northern lapwing, which appears to be uncommon in the area, with one flock of 18 being the highest number that we saw. Next slide, please. The little ring plover is a common bird with a maximum of 50 we saw at one site, but the common ring plover, the larger bird on the right in this slide, is a very scarce but regular visitor in very small numbers. We saw only one. Note its lack of yellow eye-ring, broader breastband than the, broader breastband than the little ringed, and brighter coloured legs than the little ringed. Next slide, please. Kentish plover was well distributed in small numbers, with a maximum of 30 at one site. We only saw one or two common snipe, but most of the time we were in the wrong habitat for this species, normally in much areas of much more cover than this slide shows. Next slide, please. Temming stint was surprisingly common there, with an estimate of 250 we saw at Nagrota-Surian on the 13th of February. Next slide, please. Dunlin is typically an uncommon bird inland in India, and we only saw small numbers with a maximum of 30 at one site. Next slide, please. The small pratincoll on the left here is another atypical wader, which we saw in small numbers. The accompanying river tern brings me on to another group of birds, of which we saw 4 species, river being the most common, with a maximum of 100 at Nagrota-Surian. Next slide, please. Far rarer nowadays is a black-bellied tern. So we were very pleased to get great views of 2 at Delhibird on the 14th. Next slide, please. We saw 7 to 8 species of gulls, including several that are uncommon inland in India, and one little gull that has very few records from India altogether. On the evening of the 14th, we were watching gulls and other birds dropping in close to the shore at Nagrota-Surian before moving further out in the reservoir, presumably to roost. Mike and I independently picked up single little gulls at the same moment, which we initially assumed must be the same bird. But when one was described as an adult and the other as a first-year bird, we realized that we were looking at different individuals. Unfortunately, they were both in view for less than a minute, I think, before flying off. So no photos were obtained. We also saw up to 10 slender-billed gulls, another species that is rare in land in India. And here in this slide, Caspian gull is poorly known in India, with records from only a few places still, but seems to be a regular winter visitor to Pong. We saw a number of different individuals during the time we were there, including this obliging one. This looks much like an adult here, but next slide, please. But in flight, it shows extensive black on the wingtips, indicating, well, we thought probably a third year bird. Next slide, please. In the same area was this steppe gull, often now treated as a subspecies of lesser blackback gull. We only saw a couple of these, and it seems to be much less common than Caspian in this area. You can see the darker mantle of this bird compared with the previous Caspian, and a thicker neck. Next slide, please. This is just to show the same bird in flight, showing more white on the wings than the Caspian gull, but remember that was an immature. But this bird would still have more white than an adult Caspian. And next slide, please. There's the same bird, the steppe gull on the left, with a Caspian gull on the right of the great cormorant, and a Pallas's gull posing in the middle for comparison. We saw quite a lot of Pallas's gulls, up to 50, I think, in one day. They're very regular there in winter. Next slide, please. This is another Caspian gull on the left here at Shah Nagar Barrage Lake, which we saw on the 16th of February, showing the rather small head and thin neck typical of the species. The bird on the right, which unfortunately I didn't pay much attention to at the time because I was lagging behind the others, has a strikingly deep base bill, slightly darker upper parts than the Caspian to the left of it, and a short, thick neck, and a very pale iris with a conspicuous eye ring. I'm not sure what it is, so any suggestions would be very welcome. Next slide, please. Just another view of the same two birds, emphasizing the very thin neck of the Caspian there. Next slide, please. The raptors were well represented there, and we recorded 13 species in the 4 days, including the splendid white-tailed eagle. Oh, sorry, we go back. Which initially was very distant, giving poor views, but eventually flew right over us, as you can see from Mike's slide here. But it's uncommon at Pong, and this was apparently the first record for that winter. Next slide, please. We also did well for vultures, with up to 10 Egyptian, here showing an immature. Next slide, please. And a maximum of 50 white-rumped, which you can hardly make out here. This is just a shot to show the number we saw together. These are at Myra Pali on the 15th. Next slide, please. In the same area, there are also 15 Himalayan griffons. Next slide, please. And at least 2 Eurasian griffons, looking more rufous than the Himalayan. Next slide, please. And 2 cinereous vultures, massive, broad wings and very dark plumage. Next slide, please. Moving on to passerine birds, we had 4 species of larks, including up to 70 Eurasian skylarks together. This is another poorly known bird in much of India, but it does seem to be very regular in good numbers at Pong. They were very flighty and difficult to get good views of them. The call was very distinct from that Oriental's typical buzzy call, and you can just about see in this photo the white outer tail, which is distinctive for Eurasian. It also has a white trailing edge to the wing, which is a further distinction from Oriental. Next slide, please. And this is just to show the number. You have to believe me when I say that these are all Eurasian skylarks, but they were calling, and they must all have been the same, we assume. So the Eurasian were mainly in flocks, whereas the Oriental skylarks we saw were mainly singly or in pairs. So the Eurasian is just a, well, we assume a winter visitor, and the flocks will break up and disappear later in the spring. Next slide, please. So this is just a Eurasian, or 2 Eurasian skylarks on the ground, where you can't really see any distinctive features here. And next slide, please. So this bird, which I've got here, the Oriental Skylark with a question mark, was puzzling. Because it's quite pale and large with no apparent rufous in the wings, which Oriental usually shows a rufous patch on the secondaries. But in flight, there was no white on the outer tail or the trailing edge to the wings. But the call was not the typical buzzy call like Oriental Skylark. In addition, you probably can't see that here, but it shows 2 primary tips extending well beyond the tertials, a feature of Eurasian. So all in all, this was a very puzzling bird. Next slide, please. Just another photo of the same bird showing its crest raised slightly. But that's features that both species show. Next slide, please. We also did well for pipits with 6 species, including 6 very obliging red-throated pipits at Marapalli. Note the plain face with no dark eye stripe and the very pale legs of this bird. This is an immature with a buffish throat. The adults retain the reddish throat throughout the year. Next slide, please. Just another very similar individual. And the next slide, please. And another species that is scarce in India, typically seen as odd individuals, is the Buff-Bellied Pippit. It has a more striking face pattern than red-throated and has a heavily marked dark malar area, which is characteristic. We counted at least 33 individuals in one sweep round at Marapalli on the 15th. So it's clearly not uncommon in that area, at least. But that's the only area we did see them. And the next slide, please. All right. Well, this one, I'm afraid I've messed up the caption. It says Buff-Bellied Pippit, but this is actually another red-throated pipit taken by Pooja Sharma, and you can see the very pale legs, for instance, and a feature you couldn't see on the previous shots. The whitish tram lines or braces on the back of the bird, which is a distinctive feature of red-throated. And the final slide, please. And we have many other passerine species, but don't have time to talk about them now. So this is just finished with this very obliging black-throated thrush that posed on this tree for a considerable time and allowed us lots of good photos. Okay, that's me done. Thanks very much.
Okay. Thanks very much, Tim. Can we, yeah. Well, Tim and I want to finish the talk with our visit to Maguri Bill. I'm sure many of you are much more familiar with Maguri than we are. It's a large lake and big marshland area near the Delhibird National Reserve in Tinsukia district in Assam. I was very excited about going, and we're grateful to Nick, who organised our trip to Maguri and also to other Kaziranga, other sites in other places in Assam, and we're also grateful to Jintu, who was a wonderful guide throughout. Right, so some of the highlights we had. Yes, next slide, please. Right, this was a new bird for us both, marsh babbler, so that was brilliant. We had good views of that. And next slide, please. Jordan's babbler as well. It was wonderful to see that again. We'd seen it in Nepal. Now this, of course, isn't a wetland bird; it's a grassland bird. But around Maguri wetland there are grasslands, as many of you know, which are also very important for birds. So including this Jordan's babbler. Next slide, please. And pied harrier. Just love pied harrier. Such a beautiful raptor. We saw that too. Now we went there rather early in December, straight after the the bird festival that was held in Shamble. And so we were a little early for many of the rare wetland birds, the ducks. Rare species there include, next slide please, bulbous whistling duck, and next slide please, Bear's Pochard. So these are just two of the rare ducks that you can see there. Also falcated duck is a regular visitor. Wetlands International have highlighted and described just how important Maguri Beal is. There's, for numerous species, notably resident and migratory birds, as well as being a fisheries resource, so it's vitally important for local communities. It's a flood buffer, it's a water and sediment regime regulator. It's a critical part of the Dibru-Saikoa Biosphere Reserve. It's an ecological corridor to Namdapha National Park, and many more. So its conservation of Maguri Beal should have been a priority, for the government. But unfortunately, very unfortunately, the government allowed permission for oil exploration at Maguri, and there was a leak, as you know, and a terrible blowout fire that caused, next slide please, Nick, that caused terrible damage. In fact, the damage is described by Wetlands International South Asia as being grave and largely irreparable. Well, to think of it being irreparable is, it's hard to accept that, really. But they, I guess it, perhaps it's true. And I know wetlands are an ecosystem that can recover. We just have to hope so. But we have to more than hope. There has to be measures put in place to reverse the damage, and also a halt to any further oil exploration. I don't know if I'm sure some of you do, whether oil exploration is still going on in that area. Let's hope not. And also, Wetlands International South Asia, they also point out that lessons need to be learned from this terrible accident, so that in future there aren't any development activities such as oil exploration planned for ecologically sensitive areas. Just don't want another repeat of this terrible event. But I want to finish on a note of hope anyway. Next slide, Nick, please. Yeah. Mandarin Duck. Well, in February 2021, this year, a Mandarin Duck was seen for over a week in Maguri Beal, close to the oil well blowout site. And according to local people, the species hadn't been seen there for over 100 years. And well, of course, just because this very beautiful and charismatic species has turned up, for the first time for such a long time, it doesn't mean that Maguri Beal has recovered, but it is surely a sign of hope. And the bird drew a lot of media attention, not just interest among birders, but in the media generally, and of course it drew attention once again to the plight of Maguri Beal at present, and let's hope it drew funds for conservation and restoration of Maguri Beal as well. well, I'd like to finish there and say thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, we'll try and answer.
Thank you, Carol, for
Thank
being
you.
with us. Thank you, Tim, for being with us. And actually, we all little rusted and we haven't used Zoom for a few months. It's been a really harrowing time here in India. And we're all
Yes.
getting used to coming back to some normalcy soon. So I'm hoping that this time too shall pass and we shall get back to better times very soon. And thank you everybody for joining in and bearing with us while we were rusting ourselves and trying to fix Zoom and trying to fix Facebook and everything. So the chat box is open. If you have any questions to ask Carol and Tim, please type them there. Rajneesh will take the questions. It's 1 sec. Again, we are rusted. I'm trying to unmute Rajneesh and Rajneesh, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, that's a wonderful talk, both by Carol and Tim. A good tour of the Hyderpur, Pong and Maguri. Felt all the more sweeter given that we've been all cooped up in our homes for the last 2 months. Here are some questions that are coming in. Tina Dhawan asks, when is a good time to go to Pong?
Sorry, it was, did you say what's a good time to go to Pong?
Yeah, that's it.
Well, the time I was there was February, mid-February. That was certainly a very good time, but I don't know enough about it to recommend the best time.
Question from Dipali Gangwar. How many species in total you had reported from Delhi Jamnagar Lake? I guess she meant from Lakotia Lake.
I can't remember how many we saw actually. I read somewhere that 75 wetland bird species had been recorded there. I mean, I think it must be more than that.
75 would be a good number.
Yeah.
A lot of comments coming in. Lakpa Tenzing saying, glad to hear both of you legends. A lot of people saying, very interesting session, wonderful presentation. Arvind is asking, will you publish a book on the birds of the Himalayas?
Well, we have, I mean, I think, well, we published a book on birds of the Eastern Himalayas. And that's for our publishers, really. I think, I don't know. I just
never say never, Carol.
Never say never. That's a good answer.
Yeah, never say never.
I mean, at present we're deeply immersed in revising a book on the producing a new edition of you know, for the whole field guide for the whole subcontinent, and that'll keep us busy for another 18 months. So that's going to be you know, quite a big book for the for the publishers. I'm not sure what's happening after that.
So do we have any more splits and any more species coming up?
Compared to the last edition, yeah, Tim will answer that better than me.
Yeah, we're we're revising the taxonomy considerably for this new edition. We're actually following, we had to, and the various world lists that we decided we should follow one list rather than pick things from various lists. So we decided on the bird life world list, and that's partly because Richard Grimmett is our main author, and he works for BirdLife, so he was obviously keen on us following that lead. And their list is as good as any from the point of view of what it accepts and what it doesn't. So we're happy with that. It will mean quite a lot of changes to splits, more splits than lumps, obviously, and quite a lot of changes to the English names as well, which is unfortunate, but we have to, if we decide to go with one list, then we're going to have to follow both scientific and English names.
So I can expect, I can expect my life list to go up with more splits happening.
Yes,
Yeah.
probably.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. We're hoping everyone will be, be happy with the new names, because they'll be expanding their life list quite a lot.
Hanumant is asking, over the years, what is the pattern emerging for numbers and diversity?
Ah. Well, that's a very difficult question.
What was the question? What was the question? Sorry.
Over the years, what is the pattern emerging for numbers and diversity?
I still didn't follow it, I'm afraid.
Well, do you mean numbers of birds and diversity, generally, or in India?
Generally. Like, I mean, you think it going up, bad, down?
Well, I mean,
we have the great bustard going in a very
a
nice manner.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I suppose going down really overall. I mean, some yes, I mean, yes, I suppose because of the pressures mainly of habitat loss.
Yeah, we have lost a lot of wetlands around. Also, a lot of wetlands have now become multi-storied buildings.
Yeah,
including Basai wetlands in Delhi.
Remember Basai, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Still, Hyderabad is a new one, isn't it? Relatively speaking,
true.
1980s, but that's an exception. Yeah, I suppose overall, going down really. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I have to agree. Yeah, because loss of habitat must be the most important problem for birds in India, and so much destruction and development of that's happening can only lead to further declines, one would have thought. But some species will benefit, obviously, but more likely the common birds than the rarer birds.
Yeah, blue rock pigeon is doing very well.
Sorry, which one?
The blue rock pigeon is doing very well.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. It's adaptable. Sorry, Tim.
Well, I was just going to say that one or two birds I mentioned, like the Caspian gull, apparently maybe it's just been overlooked in the past, but it does seem to be increasing in numbers in the winter. But that's not really a significant thing if it's only a winter visitor.
And also, I think now we have a lot more eyes, a lot more people in the field watching birds, a lot more people who are interested, people with cameras. So we are getting a lot of new records and a lot of new faces coming up now.
Yeah, that's very encouraging. I think I mentioned, in my last talk when I was talking about when I first came to India in 1977. I mean, there's been just a total change. Far more Indian people interested in birds than ever were then. Far more interested in conservation. I mean, and also this work with local communities that's going on. That wasn't happening then, I'm sure. So there have been, real positive changes for beneficial changes.
Rajneesh?
There's a question from JVD Murthy on the same lines. How does one convince the powers to be about the importance and relevance of wetlands in any country? Isn't this an uphill battle?
Yeah, I suppose it's an uphill battle, but still, it's one we should take part in. I mean, because wetlands, it's not just about saving birds, is it? I mean, they're vital to the whole environment, aren't they? Because of they're a resource for livelihoods for local people, and they have a lot of other ecological services as well. So I think we need to try and pass that knowledge on, and also work with local communities more. For instance, like one man, Ashish Lawyer, what he's achieved in Hyderabad, and that's just one person training the boatmen. And yeah, I think we mustn't give up, just because it's an uphill battle.
You have one more flight to India. Somendra Pandey is asking, there are some unexplored birding sites in Bihar. Any plans for visiting here?
In Bihar, did you say?
Yeah, in Bihar.
Well, we don't have any personal plans to, and it's a very difficult state to do very much in for us, certainly.
Yeah, I think we just take one or two more last questions. There's a nice question by Ruchi. She asks, dear Carol and Tim, for beginners, as some of us in this group, do you also get confused by looking at the larks and finches and bunting and pippets and warblers?
Well, personally, I did, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
well.
And the books we when I first went, we had well, there wasn't a field guide Birds of India then. Yes, it was. Anyway, you carry on, Tim. What do you think?
Yeah, well, yeah, agree with you. Yeah, it's those groups. Well, a number of groups of birds which are very confusing to everybody, not just beginners, but the gulls that they showed. There's a lot to learn about gulls still. And as you say, the books in the past weren't much help. When I first went to India in 1970, there were no books really that were. We had to use books with mainly text and no pictures. So I'm sure we did find out that subsequently that we made lots of misidentifications of birds at that time. It's good that there are now a number of good field guides available that people can use. Hopefully that will improve the level of identification throughout India.
So Ruchi, carry on birding, and please make notes. And we're all learning. Even today, when I open the wobbler page, I just go past it very fast because I don't want to open all the brown birds, all looking similar. Yeah. So I think that was perfect. Rajneesh, you want anything more?
I think one last one. Why do we?
Okay.
A question from Raghav Nath, who says, what do we do as a younger generation for saving birds?
What do you do as a younger generation for saving birds?
We should get Per in to answer this question. He's somewhere there.
Yeah.
Hi, Per.
Very
Probably
still.
need one.
Per.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You look nice with your beard.
Yeah, I'm lazy. I don't like to shave. So nice to talk to you, everyone. And unfortunately, we cannot visit India and as we used to. And of course, it would be very nice to continue with this bird life conservation project initiated some years back. I think I have spoken to you a couple of times, Nikhil, about this. And you know, Richard Grimmett and Jim Lawrence, who some of you met, are very much involved in this. And I know the project is new contributors to this project is coming. For example, on Indian skimmer and black-bellied tern. And as Tim said before, it's really the rare birds which are declining in India, and maybe the most in danger is great Indian bustard. So whoever feel and can do anything to contribute to the protection of this bird would be great. And in so many situations, it's lack of money, and we know there are money in India to protect the tiger, but there should be money to protect the great Indian bustard as well. So I don't know if you, since maybe you saw my question there about geese. In Europe, this is starting to be a big problem, that many geese are increasing. One of them is grey-leg geese, and barnacle geese is increasing incredibly. What's the situation in India? Can you see any indications that grey-leg geese and bar-headed geese are actually increasing in numbers?
I don't think so, and we still welcome them when they come. We keep looking out for them, and no, there has been no drastic increase as such. What do you say, Tim? You've been in all the wetlands in the last year.
Well, I don't really know about the situation in India but in the UK, the vast increase in grey-leg geese here, but many of those are feral birds that they were introduced. They do breed regularly in Scotland, but quite some time ago they were introduced further south, and they now the dominant goose in much of England, and the numbers there are enormous, and they do a lot of damage to vegetation and their droppings as well. So it is a great problem here, and I can imagine it may become so in India if you get similar situation.
It's the same here in northern England. Huge increase in grey-leg geese. I can see them from my window every day, and yeah, they are really a nuisance here. But they're not hunted, you see. So I don't have any predators.
Right. So that was nice. Rajnish, did you anything more?
No, that's it. Yeah.
Fine. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Tim. That was lovely. And like I said, we're all a bit rusted and we're still getting used to coming back to Zoom. But hopefully things are opening up now in India. Things are much better than what they were a month and a half ago. We've seen some really tough and bad times. But this too shall pass, and we shall be out birding, and we shall see you all here soon. And next Sunday, we have Pranoy talking to us about the birds of Goa. So please do join us. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Carol.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.